52 years separate these two cars. On my left is my Albert Blue 1972 911T, one of the purest, simplest Porsches ever built, and by far and away one of my favorite 911s I've ever had the pleasure of owning. On my right, the 2024 Carrera T. Porsche says this is their modern take on the same idea, a lighter, more focused driver's car. But here's the question. Did they pull it off? Does this new T actually carry the torch forward? That's what we're going to be finding out today. And more importantly, for those of you cross-shopping an S or a GTS with the T, how does it stack up? And how do you make the decision to go with a T over the two other models? If you love honest Porsche content and more of these deep dives, please subscribe to 11 After 9. We're just getting started. The letter T stands for touring. In the early 70s, the 911T was the entry-level car. But it wasn't about being cheap. It was about being light, approachable, and even playful. No fancy trim, no extra weight, just the essence of a 911. In fact, in a car and driver comparison back in the early 70s, the magazine compared the T against the E and the S, the two other models, in the 1972 year. And because of the low-down torque and driver-focused nature of the car, the T came out of that contest the winner. I'll refer to that a little bit later in the video. But fast forward to today. Porsche says the new Carrera T is cut from the same cloth. It has thinner glass, less sound deadening, a lighter battery, the rear seats are deleted, unless you want them back in. Manual gearbox, standard, all of it meant to strip the car down to the things that matter. They claim it's not about building the fastest 911, it's about building the most connected one. So is the T the sweet spot? Here's where the T makes sense. The base Carrera is fantastic, but you have to option it carefully. Sport Chrono, extra. PASM Sport Suspension, extra. Sport Exhaust, extra. The T gives all of that to you standard. It's the same strategy as in 1972. Start with the base engine, add the right chassis hardware, strip out the fluff. Suddenly, you're in this perfect middle ground, more engaging than a plain Carrera, but way less money than a GTS. That's the genius of the T. It's Porsche's sweet spot car. So let's talk about this gearbox. Porsche is touting the manual nature of this Carrera T is what sets it apart from the other models. And so does it? The T gets a 7-speed manual, not the 8-speed PDK, and it pairs that manual with the mechanical LSD, which you can't even get in the base Carrera. The S and the GTS can be ordered manual for sure, but most aren't. The beauty of the T is that Porsche tuned this car for the manual. The gearing's long, yes, but the ratios actually make sense for real roads. It's one of those transmissions that make you feel like you're part of the car, the kind of engagement the higher trims sometimes lose because they're chasing lap times. In my experience, the shifter feels tight, mechanical, and even rewarding. But here's the big debate. The gearing is long. You're at 75 miles an hour before second gear is even done, and over 100 before you can leave third. In my 1972, second gear tops out closer to 50. You're always shifting, always busy. In the new car, Porsche traded some of that frenetic energy for flexibility and efficiency. Whether that's a good trade depends on how you drive. Now what's interesting is in the 992.2 T, Porsche moved from the 7-speed manual back to a 6-speed manual. I don't believe they changed the ratios, but essentially what they did is they deleted the 7th gear. That was more of a highway gear, and they're really focusing this car for more of those backroad thrill-type drives. Those kind of drives, they're assuming that you're not going to be topping 185 miles an hour. Moving away from the manual transmission, we're going to discuss the other aspect of a car that really makes it feel more connected and more of a driver's car, and that's essentially the weight of it. My old T weighs in roughly at 2,315 pounds, and this new one tips the scales at 3,241 pounds. On paper, that's a huge difference. But for 2024, this is considered lightweight. Believe it or not, that's 100 pounds lighter than the similarly equipped S and roughly 200 pounds lighter than the GTS. That might not sound like much, but you do feel it, especially in the front end. I found the car changes direction with this playful, darting eagerness that the heavier cars can't quite match. It's not razor sharp like the GT3, but it is alive, and it rotates your hips instead of pushing from the nose. And Porsche doesn't just save pounds, they actually let more sound in. Thinner glass, less insulation, the whole cabin feels more raw than a standard Carrera. That's the trick. They can't make a modern car as light as mine, but they can sure make it feel lighter. And they do that, in part, by letting in more noise, more vibration, and more feedback. 0 to 60 in 3.9, quarter mile in the low 12s. It's quick, no question, but here's the key. It doesn't need to be quicker. Road and Track said it best. This car is about being as fast as a street car should be. What matters is how it makes you feel at legal speeds on a twisty road. And in that environment, it feels alive. And to me, that's exactly the same argument that made the original T so great. Compared to the S, well, the S makes more power. 443 horsepower compared to the T's 379. But the T uses the same 3-liter twin-turbo flat-six, just with a milder tune. And here's the thing. On a mountain road or a back road in New Hampshire, you never are at full throttle, at least not for long. But what you do feel is response. And with the T's smaller turbos, they spool faster, delivering torque earlier and maybe even a little bit more predictably. It's smoother, more linear, and somehow maybe a little bit more old school. The T invites you to play a little bit more inside the envelope, not constantly flirting with losing your license. So let's transition to talking about driving comfort. The GTS is incredible on the track, but with the adaptive dampers and stiffer anti-roll bars and even the lower ride height, it eats up the miles, but it really yearns for those long open sweepers. The T rides with more compliance. It breathes with the road and not over it. There's just enough softness to make it feel organic, but still enough control to keep you planted. It's a car you want to take on those 300-mile trips on the back roads of New Hampshire or North Carolina. But what about those intangibles? What sets the T apart from the S and the GTS and those little things that it's hard to put into words? I do have to say the T is a little bit louder inside, and that is intentional, as I mentioned earlier. Because Porsche removed some of that sound insulation and uses thinner glass, you hear the engine, the gravel, and the world outside that much more. The S and the GTS are quieter, faster, and more composed, but also a little bit more distant. And that's the irony. You're paying more money, but you actually lose some of that visceral connection that makes the 911 special. In the T, just like my old car, you hear the pebbles pinging into the wheel wells. You feel the suspension moving under you, and you work that gearbox. Every input matters. It's the car that makes a simple 40-mile-an-hour back road feel exciting again. And I'll take it one step further, and here's why this T might even matter more. Porsche just launched their first hybrid 911 in the GTS. That's the future. More tech, more weight, more complexity. Which means this Carrera T might be the last truly analog, ICE-only, manual-equipped 911 at the end of the price spectrum. Think about that. In the 70s, the T was the gateway into 911 ownership. And today, it might be the gateway into Porsche's past. So does it carry the torch? No, it doesn't feel as featherweight as my 2,300-pound 1972 911. It never could. But the idea is absolutely the same. Take the essentials, strip out the fluff, and give the driver something more connected than the spec sheet suggests. Getting back to that article in Car and Driver I mentioned at the beginning of the video, those three 1979 11s, the T, the E, and the S, drove like completely different cars. You had to wring the S's neck. It was a race car. It loved to sit right on redline, and it really rewarded you for that kind of drive. The E was made for those long-distance road trips where the torque and the extra horsepower really made up for those long sweepers that you'd be looking for in the early 70s. And the T was, again, that stripped-down, lower horsepower, but maybe even more rewarding connection to what Ferry Porsche really envisioned when he came out with the 901. Today, with airbags, electronics, and crumple zones, you have to look a lot more closely to see the differences between the three versions we talked about. They're all bigger cars, they all have amenities that rival the top sports cars in the world, but I do still think that they slot into appropriate buckets. The S is a fantastic everyday car. It fills that same space as the E did back in the 1970s. The GTS, well, there's your S from the 1970s. Higher horsepower, full attack, can do almost anything, but made to perform on the track as well as the back roads. And the T, well, it's a lot like my T. It chases that idea that the more you strip away, the closer you are to what you're really looking for. Porsche has this ladder where every rung promises more. More power, more grip, more capability, but sometimes more isn't better. Sometimes the most driver-focused 911 isn't the most expensive. It's the one that gives you the fewest barriers between you and the machine. And that's what the T does. It's not the fastest and it's certainly not the flashiest, but it's the one that feels the most alive. So yeah, on paper, the S and the GTS win. But on real roads, with real drivers, I think the T might just be the most engaging 911 Porsche has for sale today. So what do you think? Does the Carrera T move forward that same spirit of those early Ts from the 70s? Or is it just a marketing ploy? Drop a comment below. I would love to hear your feedback. And as always, stay for the Easter egg at the end of the video, where I'm going to give you a couple minutes of unedited video in pure Porsche sound driving through the New Hampshire back roads. If you want more honest Porsche stories, please hit subscribe. We have a lot more coming for you here on 11 After 9. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.